Welcome to the Remote Teacher Podcast. We're excited to have you here. Now, you can find out more about us on www.theremoteteacher.com.au, over on our Facebook group, Teachers in Remote Communities, Past, Present and Future, and of course by listening to this podcast. Now remember, you can also download these podcasts so you don't need internet access and you can listen to them wherever you need, including on your long drives out to your remote and rural communities. Please remember to like us on Facebook, on Instagram, and by signing up to our email list. And before I introduce our guest for today, it's important to acknowledge that the discussions that we have here are the opinion of the guest and myself alone and do not represent anyone, including Department of Education or any particular organisation. First Nation peoples, communities, students and families are all diverse and unique, and what works for our guest and myself may or may not work for you, your students, your families, your communities and your schools. So take what you need, leave what you don't, sit back and enjoy. Let's begin. Excited to welcome Lawry Mahon to the podcast today, but before we begin our discussion, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands that we meet today. So I'm in Northern Rivers, New South Wales, on the land of Bundjalung people, and Lawry is coming to you from Melbourne, which is the land of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Nations people listening along with our podcast today. Now, I'm stuttering and not doing that so well because I'm nervous having a podcast with one of my mentors, Lawry Mahon, who is the lecturer at Victoria University and the founder of the SWIRL program. Welcome, Lawry.
Thanks so much, Hakia. No, I'm the nervous one here. Come on.
So tell us a little bit about your career before your involvement with remote communities, Aboriginal education. What was going on for you?
Oh, well, I was lecturing away at Victoria University and meeting hundreds and hundreds of people exactly like you, Hakia. And I was invited up to a remote Aboriginal community by a friend of mine who was teaching up there. And she knew my interest in astronomy. So she said, why don't I roll up with my telescope and do a few experiments with the kids. So I took up my three darlings and we spent about a month up at one of the remote spots out of Alice Springs. And that was called sky watching in remote locations in those days, in the first couple of years of it. So as we sort of fell in love with the kids in the community and got invited back a couple of times, there was a meeting at the school, and there were a lot of education heavies from all over the place. And one old Aboriginal woman asked a question in this meeting about painting. Can we have Aboriginal painting in the curriculum? And the people said, oh, we already have painting in the curriculum. So they missed the point totally. And about half an hour later, she asked another question about woodwork. And we already do woodwork in the community. Wood carving, she asked about. And they said, well, we already do woodwork. Totally missing the point. So at that stage, I was feeling a little bit disgusted and just left them and went outside and ran into a bloke. I won't use names here because I have no permission to use them. But I said, it's an Aboriginal guy, and I said, you know, what's happening here? He said, don't worry about it. We're used to this sort of stuff. So I said, what if I brought up a bunch of uni students and we started, working with the kids on writing books? And he said, well, I can get you some money to do that. That was the start of SWIRL. From then on, I think we got about 10 grand back in 1997 or 8, somewhere around there. And we went back up, and what we did with SWIRL was whatever the kids wanted to do, we went along. You were in one of those groups. We'd hand the cameras over to the kids. Whatever you'd like to photograph, you photograph. And we'd take that back into the classroom. This was in the long break in the old days in the Northern Territory. In the June, July holiday, they'd have 4 weeks break. So it's pretty boring for the kids as well. So we'd head up there and get our cameras and, we'd take photographs. Even on Monday morning, we'd take photographs with the kids. And Friday afternoon, we'd drive back into Alice Springs and wait 24 hours while they developed our photographs.
Oh
Following
gosh.
day. Yeah, that's right. That might have been before your time.
That
there,
was,
wasn't it?
it was before my time. We had the digitals when I went in
Yeah.
2007, 8, and 9. Yeah.
Yes. I remember
Oh
that
gosh.
changeover. Well, we made sure we got 2 copies of each photograph. So they cost a fortune. You know, we'd be looking at $30 to get, even in the late 90s, to get these photographs developed. And we'd get to make 2 books out of that. So each book would cost us about $30 to make. So, then some, brilliant person invented digital photography and, the world changed rapidly for us. So, we were then able to, because an IBM was one of our sponsors for that, and they're still online with me, and they still support a lot of the stuff I do. So, as an acknowledgement, without pumping IBM equipment as such, I don't think you can buy it anymore. Anyhow, I think it's a different brand name now. But
Yeah, I'm not sure.
they gave us every computer we ever asked for. They gave us printers. They gave us everything we needed. Millions of dollars worth over the 25, 30 years of the program.
So was the idea was sparked from that old person at the meeting feeling frustrated that people in the education system weren't listening, and so the idea was if you catch uni students before they lose their ears, I'm not sure,
Absolutely.
lose their ability to whatever it is, and to create culturally informed uni students as well as improving literacy in remote locations, doing on-country learning.
Absolutely. And to change the mentality from going up from this superior location, say in Victoria, to teach. What we did in SWIRL was we went up to learn.
Yes.
All we had to offer was a bit of the technology the kids had not been yet exposed to, and they probably should have at that stage, but they hadn't been exposed to, and the literacy skills, but all in the wrong language. We were working in English, and all these kids had English as their 3rd or 4th language. We weren't quite aware of that, but we had in our mind that we would love to get the kids to write in their own language as well. And we used PowerPoint so that we could not only do still photographs, we could do videos after a while. And we could then record kids' voices and community people's voices in their own languages on the books about subjects that every kid got to make a choice about. And I guess even in your times there, we would have, every kid in the school got to write a book. And we printed them up and we laminated them and we bound them, and the kid took one home, and the kid took it to every house in the community. And they were proud of their work. Here's technically the most, inverted commas, illiterate group of people on earth, because they're only tested in their 3rd or 4th language, not their 1st language. So let's test the Geelong grammar kids in Pintupi language. Let's see how they go.
And ask them about bush tucker on the tests, and like we ask about snow on the tests for our remote kids.
You betcha. And track the animal that they're going to try and hunt. See, okay, which tracks these? What are you going to follow when you track?
And know their extensive family networks off by heart.
Absolutely, yeah. And what not to eat, and where not to go, and where to go, all of those things. So, we learned so much from those children particularly, and their excitement for the first time they were asked about their cultures and about their lives. They weren't told. I've been in schools, I won't name the schools, where I've seen stuff that was written up by Arthur Phillip, about, and this was used as an example to get Aboriginal kids to learn how to read and write. Give me a break. These guys were the invaders, and now some teachers are forcing these kids to learn through their writings. Give me a break. So that's probably, and SWIRL still happens. In my new school, we had a bunch of 5 young people come up at very short notice in 3rd term last year, and they worked wonders again with the kids and with the staff, because again, people get a bit, locked into their ways of operating. We need young people to come up with some exciting ideas and I think leading with their jaw, not afraid of making a few mistakes, because you can always apologise. And I've never seen a situation where any Aboriginal people have said, no, I don't forgive you. We make mistakes all the time. But when we go up only to teach, we are making the biggest mistake we can ever make. We need to go to learn and put the power, change the power structure totally so that we are the learners.
I know SWIRL's taken a lot of different shapes and faces across the years. So when I went, it was that 4-week block of time. And I know you worked with some universities in WA to help them establish their own versions. And you went over to India as well to work with children over there.
Yes.
So had lots of different faces.
We've also had some First Nations people from a place called Seychelles, just off Vancouver. I'm still in touch with 4 of the 5 of those people who visited us, and they're all teachers, they're all doing wonderful stuff as well. So not that they'd be doing SWIRL stuff. One of my problems is when teachers have been in a pretty structured and sort of conservative environment for a while, they're forced to take over those roles. So, we need to get a big bunch of young people up with really creative ideas in an environment where they're allowed to run their own show, and, kids, look at NAPLAN. I'm no fan of NAPLAN. I reckon the quicker that thing gets, flushed down the loo, the better. But lots of us are measured on our failure or success in relation to NAPLAN. I think that's one of the insidious sides of it. The teachers are judged by their NAPLAN results, and that's just ridiculous. Again, Aboriginal kids given the test in their own language. Now it's all online in the NT, so you've got to have computer technology. We don't even have the computers.
No, or the reliable internet always. Yes.
Oh, good God. Don't start me. We might have said earlier that SWIRL was sky watching in remote localities. It changed once we got the funding and went up there to story writing in remote localities, or location. So, I'm still looking, that concept of remote. When I'm sitting here in Melbourne, Numbulwar is pretty remote, but when I'm in Numbulwar, Melbourne's remote. So, if one of your listeners can give us another word for remote that starts with R, so we can still get the SWIRL thing going, we'd be really interested, okay?
Just taking a short break from our deadly interview with our guest today to remind you of some resources that might be really handy in your remote outback classroom, including Carl Merrison and my books, Black Cockatoo, My Deadly Boots, Tracks of the Missing, and his book coming out, Backyard Footy. We also have a range of other books coming out across the next couple of years, so keep an eye out. We also create book packs, so you can study these books with your students. We take out all the hard work and we create done-for-you resources so you can pick up and go, reducing your workload and time spent preparing your lessons. They are comprehensive and differentiated and ready to go for diverse needs of diverse learners, including your ESLD students in remote communities. We also have a TPT store, The Remote Teacher, that we'd love to share some resources with you, including things like NAIDOC week resources, book packs, yarning circles, getting to know you activities, and much more. So head over there to check it out. Now let's get back to this deadly interview. So you came back and forth over 30 plus years from, not 30, 25, what are we up to?
Yeah, about 26 or 27, somewhere around there, I think, yeah.
And in between you've been doing your PhD into histories.
Yep.
And the funds of knowledge, third space, and art pearls on democracy. I'm not sure I've explored any of these. Do you want to share how these tie into SWIRL and First Nations education?
Yep. How about a brief one of it all? Now, when we started SWIRL and we gave the power to the kids to direct the program in a whole lot of ways, with funds of knowledge, and if people want to do any reading on that sort of stuff, it's look up Lewis Moll, Luis Moll, Moll. He's still a researcher in the US, a lovely guy. And the funds of knowledge, if you're in a mining community and a couple of the parents drive some of those huge trucks, they can back them in to the right location with a space of about 3 centimetres. They can do that without putting too many more dits in the vehicle. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into that. But none of that knowledge gets used in the classroom. But all this family, this community knowledge, called funds of knowledge, is absolutely everywhere in every community on earth. But what do we do in most remote communities with it? Not much. Some people are doing some fabulous stuff, and I've seen some absolutely delightful stuff going on, but not enough in every community or in every classroom in every community. So that's the funds of knowledge. Then there's third space, and I guess the simplest way to explain that, especially to people who work in remote Aboriginal communities all over Australia, you've all driven down 300 kilometres of dirt road. You sit there and you drive. You got the music blast, and then you come across an eagle ripping the guts out of a dead kangaroo on the side, and you stop and you take a photograph of it. Why do we take a photograph of a wedge-tailed eagle eating the kangaroo? Because it's exotic to us. It's not our first space. It's not our home environment. That's when we stop on that road, we're in our second space. We don't know what's going on. If we happen to have an Aboriginal child, a 5-year-old in the car with us, that little kid's looking at us and saying, why the hell are you stopping here? That's common. Because that's that child's first space.
Mm-hmm.
Drive another 150 k's and we chuck a righty and we land in a school. Do we get our cameras out as teachers and start taking pickies around the classrooms? We don't. We're quite at home there. That's our first space. How does the Aboriginal kid feel? Maybe not terribly comfortable. Mm-hmm. So what hasn't happened very much in education in remote communities is teachers sitting down with community people, including children, and saying, how can we get this stuff done, this technology, this literacy, this mathematics, how can we get this done in space where you feel comfortable and I feel comfortable because I get done what I need to do? And that's the sort of stuff we're looking at.
And that's the third space when people are co-creating?
That's third space. Mm-hmm. Once the first space is the stuff, I'm sitting in first space now in a room at my daughter's house in Melbourne. That's my first. I feel very comfortable. I know a couple of clicks of my finger and a coffee will come and get thrown all over me. But it's my first space. My second space is a whole lot of other places. Mm-hmm. And my third space is the negotiated place where we all feel comfortable and safe. Is that making sense?
Yes. Yeah. And a powerful discussion and reflection for people to have. Yeah.
Yeah. And the person to look up for that sort of stuff would be a bloke by the name of Edward Soja. Now, he's a geographer and he did this work the early 1990s, I think, 92, 93. His surname is S-O-J-A and his first name is E-D-U-A-R-D, Edward Soja. And a lot of education people have hooked into that understanding now to redefine it for what we do and how we do it. His is quite a different concept, but a valuable one to have a look at and a read on. But then start to look at some of the education theorists and academics who have written about and researched some more on third space. So,
and then Art Pearl,
Art Pearl, a beautiful man who died about 3 or 4 years ago, still doing 2 or 3 days a week in his mid-90s at the University of Oregon, University of Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. Lovely, lovely bloke. But he's written a book called The Democratic Classroom. Him and a bloke from Tony Knight from La Trobe Uni. Both have been recently deceased, but their work is now being updated by Art's daughter. So you can get hold of the book now. It'll give you some great ideas about how to incorporate democratic thinking into classroom practice. So that's really valuable stuff. And
that was a little bit in SWIRL, like the students leading where they wanted the activities to go and taking their
They make the decisions. Mm-hmm. Yep, we need to step back a bit and support kids to make decisions because most schools, the only decision the kids get to make is whether or not to behave themselves, depending on how severe the punishment is or the reward. So we want to move past that and enable kids to make good decisions for good reasons. And if they don't get to practice those decisions at school, where the hell will they? So,
so taking those ideas and bringing them to a remote classroom, it gets me thinking about being culturally relevant, hands-on, on-country learning. It makes me think about the importance of this two-way learning and working with your Aboriginal education officers, and the importance of co-creating this space with your students and doing those like passion projects and linking in real life work and real life things for students as well.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Well, there's other things that can happen.
Of course.
I noticed at my school that we were getting no Aboriginal people turning up to our staff meetings. None. I did a bit of research about it. None of them get paid to come to the staff. All the teachers get paid. The Aboriginal people weren't getting paid to come to staff meetings. And I don't know about yourself, but I know, if you walk into a large meeting with particularly, maybe a bunch of academics all meeting, it's pretty embarrassing. And if you've got an option not to go, you'll probably take it. A bit of a third space, think about it. And I thought, okay, what if we break up the meeting into 4 or 5 different little locations? So there's 3 or 4 people at each of those locations. We have 2 sections in the agenda, the blue section and the green section. And the blue section, everyone has to sit around in your own little group and talk about that part of the agenda, and someone then report back to the big meeting. And the big meeting, we all come together and hear those reports. And there is a report in there. There's a report for the union rep, and there's a report from the community rep. So the community then has a report about whatever's going on that they want the teachers to know about. And that then, and I've asked the teachers, make sure you go and make a cup of tea or coffee for everybody and hand out a little plate of bickies at each table. And every person gets paid and everyone gets a cup of coffee or tea and made feel welcome. So that's the third space for, and that's worked. We've only had a couple of tries at it at school, but every time we've had 5, 6 or 7 Aboriginal people.
Which is that stuff about everyone feeling heard and making that space for the voice. So by breaking it down into smaller groups, you're making space that everyone gets a say. And by the fact that you're, making each other tea, that you're feeling valued and welcomed and warmed into that space as well. And the element that you highlighted about the pay, making sure that everyone knows these are my views and not, representing any Department of Education. But there's so much that could be done in that kind of headspace, because we've got people who are not getting paid to go to meetings, like you said, but also I get free housing with air conditioning when I go to a remote community. But the Aboriginal education officers sometimes don't even get a house or subsidies or, travel or anything. So if we want to raise up First Nations people to be teachers in communities, how about we start, funding and supporting them to stay where they are, to be in schools like that?
Exactly. Look, there's no white teacher I know who does not get paid to go to a meeting. Not one. If they don't get paid, they won't go. But
so that equality, simple equality issue there, isn't it?
It's a human rights issue, It's a human rights issue, as most of this stuff is, Look, it's not too hard. It's an hour, If we've got 10 people turn up, it's $250. Come on, we don't even, that doesn't even make the register, $250.
So you're out there being a principal right now, and you've got a couple of swirlers working under you, I thought I saw somewhere.
Well, there's one of last year's swirlers, Adrian, who's coming up to replace one of our maternity leave women this year for only one term at stage. And another young woman who was going to come up and help another person who was going to be on SWIRL, a young woman from La Trobe Uni. I had a meeting with her yesterday, and she signed up to come for at least 6 months. So it's pretty exciting. She hasn't been on a SWIRL, but she's
ready to jump in. Which highlights then the impact that SWIRL has had. What can you tell us about some of the impacts? Like I think it's 7 to 9 months the average of a remote teacher, but SWIRLers have a higher the number that are going. What kind of...
Even 10 years ago, the average SWIRL stayed 3 years or more. But people like you have destroyed that statistic. You've destroyed it. So, look, I reckon it's five years or more now, but I've got no real research. No research said about 3 years, but that research is about 10 years old. So, and the difference is, I think, and you'll know more about this because you've been through it personally. The difference, I think, is you go up there to learn. You don't go up to teach. And you form relationships that are appropriate and deep and sincere and valid. And those relationships don't change. You know, I'm on Facebook with people at the community we started SWIRL at 25 years ago. We've had grandchildren of those people participating in SWIRL programs. So what we have about a 40% return rate. And I'm thinking, okay, if we've got 20 pre-service teachers roll up for a SWIRL program and 7 or 8 of them return to teach, we have a 100% success rate. We have found 60% who have decided before going up there that it's not appropriate for them and they'll do it some other way. And even those people, and there's quite a lot, their classrooms are never the same again. There's an Aboriginal flag in the corner that wouldn't have been there prior to their SWIRL experience. There's ridicule of people like Andrew Bolt and his misunderstanding of the way the world operates. So people don't believe all the garbage anymore because they've seen it for themselves. And I think those things are crucial. So, you know, I know this is a bit, patting myself on the back, but I think 100% success. Even the ones who don't turn up, that's a successful understanding of the reality of their own lives. People are home for 5, 6 or 10 years before they do a return version so that their family situations don't allow an initial return to the NT to teach, but when it does occur, they remember it. Yeah. But then the ones who do come, they just make it, they make a difference. And anyone's listening, just have a look at this young woman in front of you now. The absolute, and not only Hake, I've got a daughter who's been through the same thing. I've got colleagues who have had daughters. And
even when you touch base on the Facebook group and ask if there are any SWIRLers there, all the people that pop their hands up and share their experiences, because
it's scary, isn't
there
it?
Are so many. There are so many.
Yeah, so it's pretty delightful and it's ongoing. Every one of those people has an impact and an influence on the way forward.
Well, and I think that's another important thing as well, because it changes mindsets, but it also shifts conversations. So the conversations that each of us have, whether we go remote or not, out in the community, we're changing stereotypes. As simple as that, like the discussions we have about remote teaching, it's not this negative, you have to do your time out there before you get into a big city. It's changing the discussions. So I wonder then, because it's been going for 26 years and has had all this impact, what impact do you think it's had on those communities that you've stayed in touch with that you keep going back to, like that power of ongoing relationships?
Well, when anyone walks into a community, any SWIRLer walks into a community that's had SWIRL, the SWIRLers are here. There's an instantaneous engagement, and people in the communities know what the SWIRLers are going to do, and the networking is already done. So the trips out hunting, the trips out gathering, the trips, the invitation to cultural occurrences is always there. And that's even changed over the years. I mean, it was quite tricky earlier with photography because, there were cultural implications for photographs. Now, even the funerals around the community I'm in, people are very happy that you take photographs of what's going on and share that stuff. So, we've seen some dramatic changes. Aboriginal communities and cultures have not stayed static. They've moved with the times. I went hunting with the people at our first community, and while we didn't go walking around with spears or boomerangs, we followed the same path they'd been following to get those meals that they'd been doing for 50,000 years. The technology had upgraded a bit. There was a 4-wheel drive and a gun. Yeah. But the same cultural practice, They would get 4 kangaroos and deliver them to the old people around the community.
Totally.
Same, exactly. Culture. We don't believe our culture's changed just because we've got iPhones. It probably has, but we still do the same sorts of things. We've just got a bit new technology to do it a bit differently.
Yes.
So,
and I think the strength perhaps as well is that it makes me think of all the programs that start up and have their funding cut, or start up and someone else has a different idea or an alternative vision for it, and it changes and they come and go, and people build up this hope and this trust in something, and then it just disappears. So the fact that there's this trust over many, many years, while the uni students that come through are different, the core values are the same, I suppose, and you're always knowing that someone will be back.
And if we've got this deep understanding of third space and funds of knowledge, the basis of every part of the curriculum will be around the local Aboriginal cultures, and no matter who comes and goes, that will be the same. We talk about Aboriginal people walking, 2 ways. We got to think about that for ourselves. We need to be the ones walking 2 ways more so, because we are visitors on Aboriginal land. And sometimes that key understanding is missed. We're here to teach how to become, white or understand the white world. Well, guess what? There's a bigger challenge. And it's a hell of a lot more fun. I don't know about you.
Oh, it's been amazing. Remote teaching is the best. And I've spoken to some other people on podcasts today about how life-changing it is when they do that, when they let go of some of their pre-ideas and preconceptions and are ready to be open and learn and say yes. So they say yes to going out on country. They say yes to, hanging out with new First Nations friends. They're ready to think through a different lens.
Yeah, exactly right. And to gain the benefits of that too. And look, the other one is, lots of people, you're not allowed to say that, Australia's a fairly racist country, but every now and then you do run into a few racists, to have the strength and the knowledge and the understanding to actually say, well, look, I don't think like that, to have a couple of one-liners to say, I don't want to listen to that garbage. I think differently to that. And guess what? I've had experience and you haven't. To say that's no longer appropriate. That should have died out. Well, it should never have existed, let alone should have died out. When we have the knowledge and the practical experiences and the friendships, relationships in particularly remote Aboriginal communities for me, and I went to school with Aboriginal people way back, 200 years ago, but to have that knowledge and understanding to be able to stand up and say, no, hold on, brother, I don't think like that anymore. I've moved on. Probably time you did.
Yeah. So we've got 5.5 minutes. Is there anything that you'd like to leave listeners with, new graduate teachers or, mature age teachers coming out to remote communities for their first time?
Funny you should ask. I have 2 vacancies at my school.
Oh, plug it. Do. Please plug.
That's a plug card, yep. We've set up units rather than classrooms now, so we have 3 grades in each unit. So I've got space for a grade 1 to 3 teacher, and I'm not even sure whether you're allowed to try and line up a woman teacher, but I've got a grade 6, 7, 8 where we're splitting for the first time in this community along cultural requests, a boys group and a girls group. So we've got a great woman for the boys group, and she knows the boys, and I've asked them, are you happy that she's your teacher? And they are. We're still looking for a woman who will take the girls. So if you've got a lot of creativity, and are prepared to, work on the edge, get as creative as you like, plan some excursions, get these kids over to Seychelles in Vancouver, take an excursion with half a dozen, 7, 8, 9 girls and their families, get them to Vancouver to work with the Native American people there. Get as creative as you possibly can.
And working under Lawry, you will be able to do those things with this flexibility and the pumping for fundraising and the connections ready to go.
We'll find it. And we've got this wonderful relationship with Anglicare now. And they have funded this year's SWIRL program. They've coughed up $50,000 for this year's SWIRL. So there's a couple of other schools in the Northern Territory region, so within 500 k's of Catherine. Give me a yell if you'd like half a dozen swirlers there. And there's a consortium of swirlers. There's now 5 universities participating.
I was going to just ask, yes, is it just Victoria University or are there others? How do people get into SWIRL?
Well, give your lecturers a yell and they can contact me. I'm no longer an academic. I consider myself a pracademic now. So doing all that academic stuff, but doing it practically, and it's pretty damn good fun. So if you want to teach years 7, 8, 9 girls, give me a yell real quick.
Well, guess whose podcast is getting edited and up first? Yours. I'll have it out soon.
You're wonderful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lawry. This has been great. And I feel like we kind of only got to touch on the surface, but there was all these little points where I'm like, yep, that's a little takeaway. Yep, that's a little takeaway. So if listeners want to take more from it, write down some of the key points that Lawry said and then look into them, like dive deeper.
Yep. And email me. Give me a yell. Yep.
Wonderful.
Happy to do that. And congratulations on your incredible work too, Hatia. That's fantastic. I see your Facebook page every day. It's always got some great stuff on it. Thank you.
My pleasure. And it's all because of you. Thank you for your guidance and support.
That's not true, but thank you.
You've been listening to the Remote Teacher Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things remote outback teaching. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, join our email list, and our Facebook group, Teachers in Remote Communities, Past, Present and Future. Any important links mentioned or businesses or organisations to support your remote teaching that our guest has mentioned today will be in the show notes. So make sure you have a look at them to find out more. And a reminder again that this podcast can be downloaded so you can access it when you do not have internet coverage or reception. So you can listen to it on your long drives between communities in the outback. Thank you for listening. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode of The Remote Teacher.